Hey, it's Dave Brown here, host of Now with Dave Brown on AMI. Check out this latest highlight from the show. Let's continue the conversation we're having around our daily poll about the merits of a 4-day work week. It seems every time you turn around, a new jurisdiction is experimenting with something related to a shorter work week. Belgium recently approved employees the option to request a shortened work week. We even have towns like Sackville, New Brunswick, toying with the idea of a 4-day work week. Shout out to you students at Mount Allison working hard towards the end of your semester. So what does a 4-day work week look like, and what does it take to make it happen? Joining us now to tell you more is Alex Soojung-Kim Pang. He's the Global Programs and Development Manager at 4-Day Week Global and joins us from California. Hey, Alex, thank you for making time to be with us today. We're grateful.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Good to be with you.
So a 4-day work week sounds simple. It fits nicely on one sentence, but I'm curious, is it as simple as just saying, 4-day work week?
Well, it is certainly simple to say. There are some challenges in putting it together, though, or of implementing it. It's not just cutting working hours without reducing pay or benefits. It also involves doing the same amount of work or having the same output in 4 days rather than 5. And making that happen is requires some planning and some work on the part of leaders and everybody in the company in order to pull that off successfully.
Alex, I feel like we've been talking about this for some time now. I'm curious, has the pandemic spearheaded this conversation or catalyzed the conversation a little bit?
Absolutely on both. In the United States, Richard Nixon was talking about a 4-day week in the 1956 presidential election. So it has been something that that has always been a little bit in the future for a very long time. But the pandemic, I think, really accelerated it because, for one thing, a lot of companies figured out how to do remote work, how to collaborate better, but they also realized that they themselves and their people could change and adapt much more quickly than they ever thought possible. And some of them, and many of the companies that have moved to 4-day weeks have built on that experience and said, we actually don't have to go back to the way things were in 2020. We can make work better for everyone. And the 4-day week is one of the things that they're trying in order to figure out how to make a future of work that works for all of us.
As I mentioned, a couple different jurisdictions have been experimenting with this, some longer than others. What kind of results have we seen from companies and even jurisdictions like entire countries or cities that have shifted towards a model that looks more like a 4-day work week?
Sure. So, companies have gotten into 4-day weeks mainly to improve recruitment, to improve retention, because founders were burning out, people wanted better work-life balance. And what we see is improvements along all of those scores reported by companies. Governments likewise get into it mainly for the recruitment and retention benefits. And in those cases, once again, you see improvements. But, governments have to pay a little bit of attention have to design the 4-day weeks a little differently sometimes in order to maintain accessibility to the public.
Yeah.
So, but I think, often they will go, let's say, to 6-hour days so that they're still open Monday through Friday, because after all, this is still a Monday through Friday world by and large. So, but, I think that there are benefits both for companies and for governments, as well as, for workers.
Alex, you touched on it there, that sometimes it does require a cultural mindset or a shift inside a place. So what does a company or a government need to be conscious of as they start exploring a 4-day work week?
For most places, culture kind of follows practice. So you don't have to change the way that you think about the relationship between, let's say, professional identity or passion and working time first, and then move to a 4-day week. Rather, you move to the 4-day week first, and then your attitudes towards those things change. But, it absolutely is the case that for the first month or two, people in companies that moved to 4-day weeks talk often about feeling guilty about taking that day off. And, that muscle memory that we should be always on, always available, and always working it takes time to overcome. But like any habit, it is something that with practice, and especially with the reinforcement of your peers, your employees, your bosses, becomes something that you do get used to and you do come to appreciate.
Alex, you mentioned the way that governments will sometimes approach it is to say, okay, we need to remain open 5 days a week for the public because the public needs access to these services. But then perhaps you can pick the day as an individual as the option for your 4-day work week. Have we seen some hybrid models like that where perhaps the building is open 5 days, but I, for example, would prefer to take a Wednesday off, whereas Charles over in HR might like the Monday or Friday for the perpetual long weekend?
There are a couple different models. So, you might have a rota system where people take different days off, or half the team is on Monday through Thursday, the other half is Tuesday through Friday. You also have systems where people will work 6-hour shifts, but the office is open 12 hours a day. So that way you actually increase the amount of time that for sort of walk-ins.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. And this is something that that's tended to be popular in Finland, for example. So it definitely is the case that depending on what your clients expect, whether you have very busy days or very quiet days of the week, that organizations will tailor their shorter work week. There's no one right way to do this, and there's certainly no one legislated way to do it yet. But I think the good news is that virtually every organization that tries it is able to figure out a style that works for them.
What do you think it might take to catalyze this movement and have it adopted more broadly?
That's a great question. So far it has been, sort of mainly small companies led by people who have a lot of concern for sort of their people and, actually for sort of themselves and their families. And we've seen pretty strong growth just within that world. We are now, in my capacity at 4-Day Week Global, starting to see larger organizations, multinational companies, sort of getting interested in it and trying to figure out how to do more limited trials in particular offices or geographical locations or functional lines. I think for widespread adoption, we're probably a few years away from legislation or sort of government policy that makes this happen on a widespread basis. However, we are seeing civil services in the United Arab Emirates this year and Iceland last year moving to shorter work weeks. And I think that is starting to drive interest or kind of legitimate the movement on the part of private companies. And so I would look to sort of smaller countries or regions or cities as the places where we're going to see real experimentation, bringing together governments, companies, schools, sort of everybody to figure out how to make a 4-day week work for for everyone in a community or a population.
Yeah, I think everyone's an important word there, because even last segment we were tugging at a couple of threads around this, because I think we can all agree there's a huge benefit in terms of offering people that entire extra day in their week for their work-life balance, for their mental health, for their laundry, for their errands, and take your pick, whatever it may be. But it's something that may not be able to be applied with an equality or equity lens. So how can maybe some industries that are either reliant on, say, like the retail space or where productivity is measured as an hourly metric, ensure that their employees can also get access to these benefits?
Right. So for organizations that that have pretty serious customer service functions or have to be open to the public, it's either playing with scheduling or sort of implementing like e-government initiatives. So Iceland and the Emirates both had sort of really serious projects to let people do an awful lot of government stuff on their phones now. So that created a lot of space for moving to a shorter work week. But even in places where you've got hourly workers, where you have people who, where you always need to have people available, for example, nurses working in nursing homes. In those places that have moved to shorter hours, what you see is that you have to have more staff because, you have to have nurses sort of available 24/7. But the places that have implemented this have found that retention rates have gone up so much that they save so much money in sort of recruiting fees or having to pay temporary workers if someone quits or calls in sick, that the programs actually pay for themselves. So you see these kinds of bigger systemic benefits in other places that really pay attention to hourly stuff like call centers or, even law firms where the billable hour reigns supreme.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that, the only two places that I think it's really difficult to implement are places that have very seasonal work, right? Not a lot of construction happens during the winter months, or jobs where you need to commute by helicopter. So, if you're flying out to sort of an oil rig in the Gulf, you probably, and you're on 10 days and then you're off 10 days, moving to a 4-day week in that environment is going to be tricky.
Hey, Alex, this has been illuminating. Where can people learn more about 4-day week global?
So just go to fourdayweek.com, and there are a bunch of resources there, sort of stuff that we are working on, including launching a new trial for companies in North America who want to try a 4-day week themselves, but would like to do it in part of a peer group, and are willing to participate in some research with us. So fourdayweek.com, and you can find out more.
Alex, I love it when we can take a colloquial topic and bring it into the world of expertise. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
Oh, you bet. It's been a pleasure.
Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcast wherever you listen. Do you want to dive into more conversations like this? Watch Now with Dave Brown weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on AMI TV or download the podcast wherever you listen.